So if you've been searching for homes and you're finding a lot that are currently available are new construction homes, this video is for you. I'm going to be sharing with you some pros and cons of buying a new construction home here in Denver, Colorado. Really excited to share it with you. But before we get started, as always, my name is Adam. I'm a licensed realtor here in Denver, Colorado. Love making videos just like this one you're about to watch right now. But more than that, I love just connecting with you. So if you have any questions at all or just want to chat, learn a little bit more about real estate, my phone number, my email, all that info is down below. Shoot me a text, give me a call. I would love to connect. But as I said, guys, today, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking all about new construction homes and what I feel are some of the pros and cons. All right, so there's been a lot of news and a lot of statistics so far this year all about new construction homes and how they're taking up even more of the inventory of what's available right now. In fact, a news article at the beginning of the year actually said that in this year, 2024, they're expecting new construction homes to take up an even larger percentage of what's available to purchase. And that's just because there are not that many homes for resale that are on the market at the moment. So traditionally, there's more than there are this year. And part of that issue is just with these higher interest rates, a lot of people are still on the fence and they're not really at the point where they're committing to selling their homes. Lower amount of inventory where new construction homes are taking advantage of that and putting out more into the marketplace. So in fact, right now in Colorado, about 1/3 of all homes available to purchase are actually new construction homes. This is a big difference from what it was like 10 years ago. And as you can imagine, this is also really changing up how Denver looks. New construction homes are always typically going to be built in neighborhoods and just areas of the state where there is a lot of open land and just the ability to create these new construction neighborhoods. I'll talk more about this later in the video, but I just wanted to make a point that 1/3 of all homes right now are new construction. So before we start dialing into my pros and cons of new construction, I also just wanted you to know I actually have this awesome 2024 new construction home buying guide. I've got a link for it down below in the show notes. It's just got everything you need to know from A to Z, all about specifically new construction homes. So if you want to learn a little bit more, I really recommend this. You check out that, download a free copy. If you have any questions after going through it, feel free to reach out. And one last thing before we get started on my pros and cons, there is actually 4 things that are almost never paid for by the new construction builder. And this is something a lot of my clients are just unaware of when they first start talking to me. And I'm going to be sharing all of that with you guys too. So especially the 4th thing, you're going to be a little bit surprised on what that one is. I'll be sharing that with you guys at the end of the video. So make sure you stick around and check those out too. But let's go ahead and get started again, guys, on my pros and cons of new construction homes here in Denver, Colorado. All right, so the first pro or just advantage of new construction homes, in my opinion, is just the modern design and the open layout of the floor plans that are typical with new construction homes. Typically, when you buy a new construction home, you're going to have the latest appliances, some of the newer amenities in homes that aren't typically found in older resale homes. And overall, they're just really appealing to a lot larger audience of buyers. So nowadays, a lot of buyers are pretty picky when it comes to the style of home that they're looking for. And a big thing that tends to always be at the top of the list is this more modern, open floor plan layout. So new construction homes are, obviously responding to the market and very aware of this. So it's definitely something that if that's important to you, you might have a little bit harder time finding stuff like that with resale homes. Whereas with new construction, it is very common and something that'll be easy for you to find and have as a nice feature of your new home if you are looking at new construction. In addition to just the newer appliances like refrigerator, stove, all that kind of stuff, in addition to that, it's also just reconfiguring some of the layout on where you find different features of the home. So one story on this that I would like to share is about just the laundry. So, almost always in resale homes, you're going to find the laundry or the utility room just off of the garage if you have an attached garage to the home. Back in the day, that was pretty much par for the course and what you would find in nearly every home. I would say the exception to that in Denver is if you're looking at older homes, stuff that was built in the, early of the century, like 1920s, 30s, 40s. In those time frame homes, a lot of times you'll actually not even have this. You'll have just something in the basement of the home. So not the most convenient. I've seen some of the basements of some of these older Victorian bungalow type homes and a lot of spiders and just, areas of the home that you probably don't want to spend a lot of time, especially when it has to do with clean clothes. But back to the new construction and why I think this is such a big advantage with new construction is they not only are typically putting a laundry room or at least an area for a washer and dryer on the main level, typically somewhere near the garage. A lot of these new construction homes are also putting in a second laundry area on the upstairs or anywhere that's close to the primary bedroom and subsequent other bedrooms that might be right next to the primary. So I think this is one of these little things that, you know, at first glance, when you're looking at a home, you don't really maybe take too long to think about it and just, oh, that's convenient, that's nice. But man, I'll tell you what, until you've had that in your house, and just the amount of time and just convenience it is to have, you know, that right next to where your closet and all of your clothes already are. I just think, especially with bigger homes, this is such a nice feature and something a lot of people don't think about until they actually have it, and then they would never live in another home without something like this. So simple little things like this are typically, you know, a nice advantage about new construction homes because they're aware of these little benefits to people and really having value to, you know, these little nuances like this one. And then the only other characteristic that I would say that I personally really highly value in homes is higher ceilings. You know, it is amazing how much of an impact a higher ceiling can make, especially if we're talking about below grade. So with new construction homes, there are a lot that have a basement. However, a lot of them also do not. So that's one little nuance that you're gonna have to start kind of being aware of when you look at new construction communities. One other thing that really makes this lower level so nice is the tall ceilings. Something you don't really think about that often, but having that extra foot of clearance, these are 9-foot ceilings here, makes such a difference. It really gives you that custom home feel. I just think makes such a dramatic difference when it comes to not feeling like a basement. It really just feels like a lower level. You know, a lot of times in these scenarios, they're also doing window wells. So the areas, if you're below grade, that give you an egress or an access to get out of that area if there ever was a fire. They do a really good job also where creating these egress window spaces where they're either still letting in a lot of natural light, or even built to the point where it's not completely below grade, where maybe half of the window well is below, but the other half you still have daylight. Typically you can see some nice planters or flowers, just really making that space a lot more inviting. And again, just not making it feel nearly as much like a basement space. So these are just little things that you find in a lot of new construction homes that you won't in these resale homes unless they were also built, you know, in the fairly recent, 2005, 2010 type time frame. All right, so now let's just jump right into my second pro. So I'm just gonna talk about all three of the the advantages of new construction first, and then afterwards I'll talk about the 3 cons or the negatives of new construction. But again, my number 2 pro is gonna be customization. So new construction homes, you have a lot of options if you get in early enough during the construction process. And I will also say that this varies by builder. You know, there are some builders that are more affordable, that this just does not exist at all. Part of the way that they're able to provide a lower cost of home is by having very standardized kind of cookie cutter finishes and just materials that they're using in their homes that they're building. So some homes, this is not even an option, but there are quite a few builders out there that do have, in some different degrees, the ability to have some customization with your homes. So there are some that are more of a package-based customization, and I'd actually say this is probably the most common. So I'll give you a little story and example of what I mean by this. So one of the new construction builders that I personally really like is a company called Orchard Homes, and they have a beautiful development in Erie, Colorado, which is just north in the slightly, basically just north of Denver. And in this area, what's really cool is that these homes up here, a lot of them are called carriage homes. So carriage homes are a unique type of new construction homes. It's something you're starting to see more and more of in Denver. But what it means is there's basically a little cluster of homes, typically anywhere between 4 and 6 homes, and they all have a shared driveway where then each of the homes off of that driveway have their garages, and still a little bit of privacy between the homes, but this shared garage or shared driveway space. With these types of carriage homes, they typically will have like an A, B, and C package that you can choose between. This will include different types of finishes when it comes to countertops, also just some of the paint colors, little extras like maybe having a fireplace in the living room or potentially an extra deck off of part of the house, stuff like that. So A, B, C type packages are very common with new construction, and I'd say that is most likely what you're going to encounter when you're looking at some customization options. However, there are still a few other home builders that are very high end, and I'd say in Denver, these are the $1 million plus new construction builders builders, and they can be completely customized where you actually get assigned an interior designer early on in the process, and you have the ability to choose every little feature that you want in the home, which is pretty incredible, especially if you have some tastes that, you're having a hard time finding other homes currently that are matching what you're looking for. And if your budget allows, this could be a great option for you. So talking a little bit more about this community, Orchard Homes up in Erie, one of the things that I had a client looking at up there that I thought was cool is, there was this additional deck off of the living room that the model home had that we thought was incredible. And that was another one of these upgrades that you could add on and have as part of your home if you wanted it. So the last thing I'll just mention as a word of caution when it comes to just this whole part of the new construction building process and the ability to choose some of your features and upgrades. When you're driving through a new construction community, without a doubt, you're going to see tons of big billboards and signs and, this builder community starting as low as $450,000, whatever, the billboard says. I would just caution you that whatever price point they're advertising for their lowest as low as price point, that is going to be incredibly bare bones and nothing like what you're probably seeing if you're also touring their model homes. So, and I've had a lot of clients that I've taken out and toured model homes with for these new construction communities. And as you can imagine, the new construction builders, they want these to look as good as they possibly can. So you're seeing every bell and whistle available in the model homes, which in some cases could add even as much as $100,000 or more to whatever that base price is that's being advertised. So I would just give you a little bit of a caution to be aware of this. And when you're seeing, as low as price points being advertised on these billboards, just be aware that you're going to be spending more than that if you have any level of customization or just want to have some features that are pretty common with most of the homes that, you might not get at that very, very entry level that they're advertising. So just make sure you're aware of that. All right, and then my third and final pro advantage of new construction homes is going to be coming down just to the less expensive maintenance of the home and also the energy efficiency. So, new construction nowadays, really anywhere in the country, but especially in a progressive state like Colorado, the building department has implemented some pretty significant requirements for building homes and what is needed to be done in order to pass building inspections. A lot of this stuff comes down to what's called green building or even being LEED certified. And that's just some different kind of hoops that builders have to jump through to ensure that they're at a certain level of compliance when it comes to energy efficiency and building with renewable products and just being as cautious as they can with building the home with, with environmental awareness. So when it comes just to the lower maintenance costs of the homes, with newer construction, as you can imagine, they're using new products with everything from windows to types of insulation to even the different types of materials being used on the outside of the building, the different types of siding or stucco, whatever it may be. All of this is being held to a higher level of standard when it comes to efficiency, which you're going to benefit from as a new homeowner if the home is recently built. With older homes, typically the windows might be only a single or a double pane, letting a lot of not only sunlight into the home, which can make your air conditioning have to work extra hard just to keep the temperature regulated, and also stuff like insulation not being used as high level of an insulation that's being used in new homes, where this also could affect just the amount of energy being contained in the home, or if you're losing some of your heating and your air conditioning outside of the home just from it being older and not as, professionally done to the standards of today. When you buy a new construction home, there's also typically a 1-year warranty on everything that they've put into the home. This is something that's very important to, during the final phase, right before you purchase and sign on the dotted line for your home, we do what's called a final walkthrough. And this is something I'm a big stickler about with my clients, is going just overboard when it comes to being picky on identifying any little things that might not be up to the standards of what we want to see in this home. So, any spots where they maybe need to touch up the paint, or maybe there's just some little piece of tile that's just a little bit off. All that kind of stuff is so important to be done, but there is a little bit of assurance knowing that there is usually a warranty by the builder to go in and kind of correct some of this stuff. I will give one little warning on this topic too, though. A lot of these home builders, they're a volume-based business and they're just going as quickly as they can. As soon as they finish your home, they're on to the next. And that unfortunately does bring in a little bit of a challenge when it comes to getting them to come back into the home and make any repairs and small fixes, because that's not adding to their bottom line. They're not really profiting from that once the home has been sold. So sometimes, depending on the builder and just just how busy they are. That has been a complaint by a few of my clients, that just is something to be aware of if you're buying new construction, just to really be a little bit on top and almost a nuisance to the builder if you do have things that just need to be addressed, especially within that limited time frame, which typically is a 1-year window. All right, so went through 3 pros, 3 pretty big advantages of new construction homes, but as you can imagine, there's definitely also some cons and some disadvantages of new construction homes. So let's jump right into that as well. But before I do, also want to remind you guys, I have that new construction guide. It's from A to Z, everything you need to know about buying a new construction home. The link down below is for you to download a completely free copy. So I ask that you definitely check that out, because there's a lot of extra valuable little hidden stuff that I'm sharing in that I definitely think you'd want to know about if you are going to be considering at least buying a new construction home. But let's go ahead and get started. Again, my first con, so my first negative of new construction homes is going to have to do just with the higher initial expense. So, as you can imagine, if you're buying a brand new home, it's going to be a little bit more expensive than buying a resale home typically. That's not always the case. In fact, right now, since there are fewer resale homes in the Denver market available right now to purchase, a lot of those sellers are a little bit more motivated and could be making a little bit larger of a concession on the price just to get the home sold. So right now is a little bit different of a scenario than what's typical, but traditionally new construction homes are a little bit more expensive than buying a resale home. But that's for a good reason. You're buying a brand new home with a higher quality of finishes and building materials used, all that stuff. So while this is a con, a disadvantage to some, that it's a higher expense, I do think though that there is some reasoning behind why that's justified. However, I will also though say, so while it is, I'm talking about a con, a disadvantage here, while the cost is higher, I also will say that in a lot of these new construction communities, since they are quite large, you're gonna have a lot of comparable properties. So other properties that are almost identical to yours. And when it comes time to resell your home, that sometimes can be a negative, because if other homes are potentially selling for a little bit less than maybe what they should, let's just say that you have a neighbor that has the exact same home, same floor plan as yours, and they are getting a divorce and they want out. They need to get that home sold ASAP. So they're a very motivated seller. They might agree to sell that home for a little bit less than maybe what you would sell your home for when the time came. So despite that, if this home sells for a little bit lesser, that's going to negatively affect your home's comparables when it comes time to price and list your home for sale. So when you have these new construction communities, since there are quite a few homes that have similar characteristics, it's very easy for an appraiser, but also for a realtor that's representing a buyer to justify, well, if this home sold for this amount, then I don't think yours should sell more than this amount. So you have some extra little bit of challenges when it comes to reselling new construction homes. In contrast, if you bought a resale home from the 1990s and you did a bunch of sweat equity, did a bunch of work yourself to make the backyard much more landscaped and great, and did some other improvements inside, and your home is very unique compared to other homes in your neighborhood. In this type of case, you're not going to have that same issue where other homes are going to be pulling your value down when it comes time to sell. So something just to keep in mind, and I do think that's one of the reasons I would put this as a disadvantage and a con, is just that higher price point that you're buying in, and also just the amount of other homes that might be similar to yours when it does come time to sell. All right, so jumping right into my second disadvantage of new construction homes is just going to be the location. And this is something that I think could be a pro or a con, but more so, especially with, people right now that are moving into these new construction communities, I'm going to put this as a con. And just the location, what I mean by this is, as you can imagine, Denver is expanding so rapidly, and there are so many people, it's slowed down recently, but there's still a lot of people moving to Denver. These new construction communities have nowhere to be built except on the outlying portion of Denver, and they keep expanding further and further out into these more rural areas. So if you're going into a new construction community and you're buying your home in this community and it's earlier on in the development stage, there's a good chance there's not going to be that many amenities around you when it comes to restaurants, different shopping centers, grocery stores, car washes, all these little conveniences that you might be used to now. If you move into an area that might just still be on that earlier portion of their build out, you might have to drive a little bit to get to these places, and that just might not be quite as desirable if you really value that kind of stuff. So I would also, on top of that, say that with these new construction communities, if you are moving into it earlier on, you got to be careful. I have one little story about recently I was out showing a new construction community to some clients of mine, and one of them actually got a nail in their tire, and that was just because we were driving through this portion of the new construction community where there was about 15 homes, all very early on in the building stage, where they just still had their 2x4s, just like a very early on portion of this development. A lot of construction trucks going in and out of there, and some big dumpsters on the sidewalk and on the street right there. And unfortunately my client drove over a nail and didn't realize until a couple hours later, and we're positive that that's where it came from. So stuff like that, if you're in a new construction area like that, you might have to be dealing with some of these challenges for a period of time. I will say though that most builders are very cautious as best they can be with this, and they'll build out in little zones or little kind of street sections of the community. So they won't even start building until all 6 or 8 homes on the next street have been purchased, and then at that point they get in there, they knock all of them out at once, and then they're on to the next area in the community. So a benefit of this is that you're not going to be dealing with necessarily too much immediate construction traffic on your street or in your little cul-de-sac, but if you're having to still get to that area and drive through other parts of the community that are being developed, you're going to run into this. So just be very aware of that. And then I will also just share one of the best communities for new construction, in my opinion, is down south, a little bit south of where I live in Littleton, and it's an area called Sterling Ranch. And Sterling Ranch, I think, is going to be one of the best new construction home communities here in the future. In fact, I'll link a couple videos of some video tours I've done. I've gone through several of the different builders and just the different types of homes that they have down there for different clients of mine. I've taken really high-end video tours, so definitely check out a few of those. But I wanted to bring up Sterling Ranch because this is an example of an area that is going to be incredible when it's done. It's in a great part of Denver where it's got beautiful views of the western slope, some really cool red rock formations even in the distance, but it is very early on in their building stage. So right now it is just an enormous open blank canvas where they're building, and they're building quick, but it's taking some time. And again, that could be a con and a disadvantage if you are moving in right now and you got to wait for another year until all these other amenities are finished. In fact, when I was out here with a client a few weeks ago, we finally got to see that there was their first little mini shopping center. This is a large enough community where they're actually putting in little kind of areas within the community in different sections where they have gas stations and little convenience stores, like mini supermarkets. This one also had a little restaurant with a bar that was going in. So, they're very intentional about where they're putting this stuff, but it might take a little bit of time before it's done. The one last thing on this point would be if you are a family and you've got some children that are, going into different school district programs, just also be aware that these new construction communities sometimes are in areas where they're just getting that part of the development going too. So you might not have the best schools right off the bat. I always recommend, if you're interested at all in any sort of questions regarding school districts, check out niche.com. Great website that's got a ton of very accurate real-time data on personal, people that are entering in their own feedback on what the best school districts are and what the best, areas even within the school district are if there's several schools to pick. So definitely check out niche.com, but just also be aware that, there could be a period of time where your school's not going to be at 100% occupants or not going to be completely full yet, full of students. And also there might not be as many, after school programs or some of these other things that go along with a more established school system. All right. And then my third and final con is going to be just about timing. So, builders often have a pretty bad reputation when it comes to sticking to certain deadlines. And with new construction homes, that is definitely a disadvantage for a lot of people, is this uncertainty about when is my home going to be finished and ready for me to move into. I've got some clients recently that, already sold their home from a different state. They're getting ready, to move into their new construction home once it was completed. And they had a very specific tight deadline. They needed to be in that home before the school semester started and just be able to put down their roots and be able to establish themselves at a specific time in the year. And, they had some issues with construction delays, and this is just something that can be very stressful if you are somebody that has, some other factors outside of the home as far as when you need to be there by. New job or, whatever it may be. So just be very aware of that. I think some construction builders have more of a reputation for being on time than others, but One thing that I will say is it has improved a lot over the past year. Ever since we had, some issues throughout the COVID-19 phase where materials were very hard to get, and there's just a lot of issues that were out of anybody's control. Luckily, a lot of that has improved. So I do think that new construction timelines are a lot better than they were a year and 2 years ago. But you have to be still very cautious and aware of this. A lot of people have to get, obviously, a loan, a mortgage to buy their home. And sometimes you'll get pre-approved with a certain interest rate and be pre-approved for a certain amount of money. And if this timing takes so long, let's just say 6 months past where maybe you had gotten your pre-approval letter from your mortgage, from your lender, there could be a chance that maybe the interest rates have now gone up and the locked-in rate that you initially had is no longer valid because it was only good for a period of 3 or 6 months. So there's also been some horror stories of people that have gone very far along into the process, maybe even a customization of a home, and then when it comes time, they're all of a sudden unable to qualify for the loan that they had already been pre-qualified for, a few months back when rates were a little bit lower and maybe the loan to value or some of the other characteristics to qualify for the loan were a little bit more advantageous for them. So, there's definitely some horror stories about that kind of stuff too. So that all comes back to the timing and being able to be assured that when they say it's going to be done, it's going to be done. So definitely keep that in mind if you're somebody that has a tight deadline. Be very upfront and vocal about that with your real estate professional like myself, but also anybody else that you're connected with throughout this building process with the builder. So they're going to have people on their team that you're going to be communicating with as well. And the more open you can be with explaining that to them and putting a little bit of a fire under them to hold tight to those deadlines, that can be a huge important part of this process if you are getting into the building of the home at an earlier stage. So keep that in mind. And then also kind of going along with these delays, as you can imagine, like I talked earlier about with just the quality control and just being assured that the quality of everything from the top down of the home is being done to the proper standards and to the quality that you're expecting. When they're blowing through all these homes and just trying to get them done as soon as possible, especially if they have a tight deadline to meet, there's a lot of issues with people that bought homes that have moved in and all of a sudden, certain doors aren't closing correctly, or maybe there's some scratches on the paint, maybe some more significant things like maybe some settling of the home, some structural issues with cracks, stuff like that. So it's just so important that when you're doing your final walkthroughs with the builder before, signing on that dotted line, and then also for that first year of living in the home, just being as aware as you possibly can be and just addressing any of this kind of stuff while your home is still under warranty. All right, and then last but not least, before we close out this video, as I promised at the beginning of the video, I wanted to share with you 4 things that are typically not paid for or included at the time that you buy your home and you close and you move in for the very first day and you get in and, oh man, this isn't here. Oh, this isn't here. What's going on here? So the 4 things that I'll share with you, I also have in a whole separate video where I go more in depth on all of this. So I'll link that up here in the video too. So just 4 things that new construction homes often do not provide you. Number 1 is going to be, believe it or not, a refrigerator. So refrigerator is not part of a habitability requirement where they have to have that for their certificate of occupancy. You do need that with other things like a stove, but for some reason, refrigerator is not included in that. So, it's very important to be aware of this because a refrigerator could be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500, $3,000 or more. It could be very expensive. So just be aware that that typically is not included. I will say though, that one way that you can often negotiate some of these little things like these 4 that I'm talking about now, this is stuff that you can negotiate as part of the deal and rely on a realtor like myself to do a really good job with negotiating where some of this stuff might actually be included as a kind of a concession that the builder is providing you with, especially if it's at the end of the year when they've got inventory that they just got to get off their books before the end of the year. So if you do have some a little bit of flexibility on when you might be moving towards the end of any calendar year, that oftentimes gives you the best opportunity to negotiate and get a few of these items that we're talking about for free or at a lot larger of a discount. So again, number 1, refrigerator. Number 2 is going to be washer and dryer. This one's a little bit more expected for a lot of people, but when you walk through and tour a lot of the model units, they always have this included and you always see them in the laundry room and you don't really think about it necessarily, but this is something that almost always is going to be a requirement that you provide yourself. The one exception to that again is if it's towards the end of the year and you might be buying a model unit where some of this stuff is already in there just to kind of showcase, you can often negotiate getting those as part of your closing negotiation and settlement with buying a home. So number 2, washer and dryer. Number 3 is a big one, and this one is going to be the window coverings. So you go into a home, got these beautiful window shades, maybe some valve balances and some really nice drapes. All of that stuff is just for show. This is, again, just a way to make that model unit look as good as it possibly can. So be aware that, this is something that probably out of all 4 of these that I'm sharing with you could be the most expensive, especially if you want some higher end Hunter Douglas or some, more high quality window coverings. So there's those top down, bottom up style that are quite expensive. There's just the cheaper, more basic styles. So there's a lot of options for you to choose from. But again, this is almost always going to be something that you need to be aware of and be in a position where you can pay to put these in when you buy your home. I've had some different scenarios in the past where a client has even moved into their home and they've already kind of maxed out their budget and what they can afford at the moment. And they might go on living a few months with no window coverings. I've even seen where people have stapled a bed sheet to the window just to provide a little bit of privacy, or maybe it's just to eliminate some of that blaring sun at 7 in the morning when it's just bright and coming right through a certain window. So just be very aware about these window coverings being not only a significant expense, but that's something you need to be most likely providing yourself. And then, as I said at the beginning of the video, the 4th one that I am usually probably getting the most amount of surprise from my clients when we're walking through these different new construction communities, and that's going to be the rear of the home, so the backyard, the landscaping. So when you go into communities, a lot of times you're just going to see dirt. You're not going to see any sod or any nice green grass, especially in the back of the house. And this is almost always going to be something they're actually relying on you as the buyer to be responsible for paying for. It could also even include fencing. So if you have 5 homes that all back up to the same portion of open space and you're kind of expecting the home to look like the model homes did, where there's nice privacy fencing on either side and nice landscaped grass with irrigation, that's stuff that, again, is an additional expense, and depending on your taste and what you want to put in, could be several thousand, if not even $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 or more. So this is something that is a significant expense and definitely something you want to be prepared for before you buy the home. Going back to what I've said about these other 3 items before, this is also a big negotiation tool that you can use if you are trying to buy a home towards the end of the year and maybe try and, coordinate where they could at least put in all the sprinkler irrigation lines in for you and include that in their cost, and you're just maybe paying for the grass, or maybe you're able to get them to pay for everything because they just got to get that home sold and get it off of their books before the end of the year. So again, all 4 of those are big. If you add them all up, could be several $1,000s, and something that a lot of people aren't expecting, as part of what they're going to need to pay for on top of all the other expenses when you buy a new home. So glad you guys are at least now aware of those 4 things. I include all of those in my new construction buyer guide too. So make sure, if you haven't yet, download that after you finish watching this video. All right, so there you have it. Some pretty interesting pros and cons of new construction homes here in Denver, Colorado. I think this is such an awesome part of the inventory here in Denver, Colorado. And I just recommend, if you're maybe somebody that has always looked down on, or maybe not been somebody that really thinks about new construction as something that might work for you, I highly recommend you at least give me a call and let's just go out and check out a few sometime, because you would be amazed at not only the quality of work that some of these builders have, but also just how creative they are with building these very modern and just custom experiences within the home. Open floor plans, different areas to socialize and host parties, and just have a different style of home than maybe what you're typically used to if you're looking at is resale homes. So hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I had a great time making this video for you. And as always, my phone number, my email, all that info is down below. I recommend, just please reach out to me. I love just connecting with viewers like yourselves. What works out really great is setting up a quick 30-minute Zoom call, just a complimentary call that I love to provide people with to just do a little bit of a real estate strategy session. And I guarantee I can find a few additional ways that I can provide value and help you along no matter what portion or what phase of the buying journey you're currently on. I'd love the opportunity to help you. So make sure you reach out, and until next time, I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I look forward to seeing you on an all-new episode of Living in Denver. Have a good one.